Hi, my name's Andrea Waltz. I'm the co-author of the book Go for No, and I was just on talking with Kim Sorrelle on the Kim Sorrelle Show, and I'm so excited for you to listen to this. We talked about the power of no, that is overcoming fear of rejection and learning to have the courage to ask for what you want and all kinds of stuff related to this. I hope you love listening to the show as much as I did talking to Kim. So please go in there, listen to the show, and hope you love it.
Welcome to the show. I'm Kim Sorrelle, and I am so happy that you are here. I'm a speaker, I'm an author. I love business, I love people. I get to do all kinds of fun things. And one of my favorite things is meeting new people. And I've met this woman who I read her book quite some time ago. And then all of a sudden I got to meet her. And it's one of the best books I've ever read. And so I know you're going to love her. So thanks for being here. And Andrea Waltz, thank you for being here.
Hey, Kim, I am so excited for our chat today.
Yeah, I am too. I've so been looking forward to it. So before we get into the book and the cool stuff you're doing now, helping people with books and all your things, I'd love for people to get to know you. So can you tell me, what was 8-year-old Andrea like?
Oh gosh, that's such a perfect question because yeah, the 8-year-old me, I was such a creative at 8. I was gosh, it was the 80s, so I was playing video games and I was in love with watching movies. In fact, I was such a fan of Star Wars. We had a bootleg copy. I don't know how we got it, my family. We had the one of the first VCRs, which was like this gigantic contraption, this huge machine. And we had a copy of Star Wars, like the original from 1977. And I would watch it all the time, Kim. I would watch it every weekend, and I became obsessed with making movies. Like I wanted to be a producer. I didn't want to be an actor. I didn't want to direct movies, but I wanted to like come up with the ideas and brainstorm. And so one day, this friend of the family, I guess, was over at our house and knew about my obsession with Star Wars and said that he had the personal office number of George Lucas, who's the creator of and writer of Star Wars, and would I like it? And I said, absolutely. So a couple days later, I called George Lucas's office and I basically pitched in my little 8-year-old brain. I thought, he would probably think I'm a genius for all of my ideas and all of the things I'm always thinking about. And he'll want to hire me. He'll want to just bring me up to his office and I'll live in Hollywood. I was kooky, right? I'm like this kooky creative person. And so I called and I got his personal secretary who answered, and I explained who I was and that I wanted to speak with him. And she said, well, I have something better. We're going to sign you up for the George Lucas fan club. And so I got signed up for the fan club, but I was so disappointed, Kim, because I thought for sure that I would be able to talk to him and convince him that I had all these new brilliant ideas. And I did get signed up for the fan club, but I have to tell you that rejection really threw me for a loop. And it's funny because just a few years ago, I was talking with my mom about this situation, the story, and we were laughing about it. And she goes, do you remember what happened after you hung up after that call? And I said, no. And she goes, you threw a screaming, crying fit. You were so upset. She said, I've never done this, but I had to slap you across the face just to snap you out of it. You were so upset. And I said, really? I don't even remember. So part of my mission, I guess, Kim, now these days is I somehow got into the livelihood. It's so weird how you just sometimes create jobs for yourself of helping people overcome the fear of rejection and what happens when you do get those big no's and how to handle it. So I started my little 8-year-old life with a really big rejection, but I do give myself credit though, because I did go after a really big no, which we encourage people to do, right? Dream big. And yeah, so that's kind of where I started. I did as I got older, I was terrible in high school. I didn't go very often. I was absent a lot, let's put it that way, hung out with the wrong crowd. I pulled myself together in college and ended up graduating with honors I got a Bachelor of Science in Criminal Justice. I wanted to catch bad guys. That was my dream. But instead, I ended up in the corporate world. And I met my now husband, who together we launched this business of teaching people how to overcome failure, rejection, hearing the word no. So, like most people's journeys, right? It looks a little bit like spaghetti. It definitely wasn't a straight line.
That's so funny. Oh my gosh. I love it that you called George Lucas. You are my hero. I love that you did that, that you were brave enough at 8 years old to call this guy. And how sad. What a he missed out, man. Because he could have put a desk right next to his. You could have been sitting there giving him all kinds of gold, all kinds of great ideas. And instead, you got to be a member of the fan club. And but what a thing to learn. Yeah, I have a similar-ish story in a way. When I was 10, I went to Disneyland for the first time. And I had this new dress on. And I'm walking down Main Street in this dress. And I just knew I was going to be discovered. I just knew that somebody at Disney was going to come up to me and go, "We need you in our new show. Like, you're the one we've been looking for." And I'm walking down Main Street, holding my head high, just waiting for somebody to come up. And nobody ever came. Nobody ever came. And I felt that rejection, even though I didn't have anybody's phone number. It's not like somebody turned me on to somebody that I could call, but somehow in my 10-year-old brain, I just knew that it was going to happen. And this great discovery was, and God bless them because they found me, that the person they've been searching for. And so I just can imagine how disappointed you were, but what a cool thing that happened at 8 years old. And then what has happened in your life since and where you are today. I love it. I love that that's your origin story. That's so cool.
Well, and I love your story too. And the reason I think that's so, first of all, it's so adorable because when we're young, we live in a fantasy world, right? So much. And I know that I did too. That was in my fantasy brain. I thought all I have to do is explain who I am and he'll pick me, right? And this is so critical because people ask me all the time, they say, why do people fear rejection? And I know that we'll talk about this, but there's two huge pieces. But one of them is that somewhere when everybody, as we grow up, has had some kind of mini traumatic, sometimes really traumatic rejection. Sometimes it's maybe later, maybe it's a high school crush or something like that. Maybe it's early, like with you and me, at 8 and 10. But we've all had those devastating things, and so that pain lingers, and I think it's really deep, and it may not be something that you consciously think about, but it's something that you don't want to have happen again.
Right. Yeah. No, I don't think people necessarily like rejection, but I did work with a man at one point in time that I admired deeply. And he always said, every no is just one step closer to a yes. And that's kind of what you believe as well, right? And the value of the no. And people think that no is just this negative word. And if you hear no, that's it. The door's closed. You can't learn anything from it. It's just a no and you move on. But you do a beautiful job of pointing out, no, the no is not just a no, and what you can actually do with the no and why no is good and important.
Are so many nuances I never knew existed until I did a deep dive over the last 20 years, picking apart every aspect of rejection. And I love it. It is my passion. So I know we're going to talk about all things rejection, but you're right. No is just one piece in the long path, the long puzzle. Sometimes it's a lot of no's to that yes.
Yes. Yeah. And we all hear it. We all hear no. And, when I was raising kids, when my kids were little, I always thought I wanted to say no as little as possible. I wanted to say yes to anything I could and then save the no's for the really important stuff. Like, no, don't put your hand on the hot stove. That's a definite no, right? Don't run into the street, grab them. That's a no. But anything I could say yes to, I wanted to, because we hear no from the time we're little. I don't even know how many times we hear the word no and on any given day and as we're growing up.
Yeah, it's all the time, it's everywhere, and I think that's what is so fascinating about this for me is that we hear it so often, and as we're kids, we get used to just bouncing off of it. It's like a duck, right? It just it's water off a duck's back, it just hits us, we move on, and then there's that traumatic thing, that thing that teaches us, "Ooh, there's real pain associated with rejection." And sometimes, depending on how we're raised and the people around us, sometimes we don't necessarily have the tools to be able to handle that in our own minds, in our young brains. And so without those tools, we don't assimilate it correctly, and we make up stories about the fact that that no means that we're somehow bad. Some of us who are listening may, some people listening may identify with the idea of being a people pleaser. And I certainly come from a long line of people pleasers. I must, because it's definitely encoded into my DNA. And because of that, I think I equate that rejection, that hearing no, with if I'm good. And being good is really, being a good person is so important to me. And as a young girl, it was like I wanted to be seen as this perfect, pretty, adorable, girl who did no wrong. And so as a result, you kind of learn, once you get out of that age where the no's are bouncing off, you start like saying, oh, actually, it's the opposite. I don't want to hear no. I don't want anyone upset at me. I don't want to rock the boat. And so I have spent a lot of time working on myself of learning that no doesn't mean that I'm bad, that no doesn't mean that a relationship is destroyed, that you can learn to ask. And it's interesting, Kim, because as much as Richard and I talk about no, and Go for No is all about no, in the last few years, my work has kind of transitioned almost more into the space of having the courage to ask and just looking at it a little differently. So going not so directly at people from the no standpoint, but how can I help people have the courage to ask? Because that's like it's like the proactive positive to the no, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. I love that actually, because I think that's a fear within a whole lot of people, probably everybody to some extent in some different circumstances, right? That you don't ask because if the answer is no, you're going to be disappointed, you're going to be destroyed, you're going to be devastated, whatever. And so then you don't ask. And I'm thinking, man, that can really hold you back in life, the not asking, missed opportunities, missed relationships, missed all kinds of things if you don't ask. So I love that. I love what you're saying. So how do you get people there? How do you get people more comfortable with the asking?
Right. Well, a couple things. First off, you've got to set up you've got to create a mindset of one that interprets no in the right way, to your point. So we're all typically interpreting no's all different ways. And what the main thing that I tell people is your brain, when it gets rejected, the main question it asks is, what does this mean? Right? That's the first thing. It's, what does this mean? What does this mean about me? What does this mean about my future? What does it mean about the thing that I asked? And right away, of course, your brain, anytime you give it a question, it wants to answer it. And if you're thinking about no incorrectly, if you didn't have the tools as you were growing up to assimilate it properly, then the first knee-jerk reaction will be like it used to be for me. Well, you're bad. You shouldn't have asked. You look pushy. Maybe you look aggressive. um this this is the end. This, you're not going to get what you want, and so you might as well turn back and give up. So the thing is, how do we get people to start interpreting no differently? And that's like the big hurdle. And so for us, regarding Go for No, this whole idea comes from kind of a place of giving people permission to fail, and giving people permission to just ask and be willing to hear that no and change your interpretation in that moment, and kind of reprogram or rethink what that means. So a lot of it is just changing your interpretation of what that no means, and it could be a business no, it could be a personal no. So that's one piece of it, Kim. And then the other piece of it is how can we teach people to ask in such a way where it may mitigate some of those things. So one of the things that I did, a really fun, something I did this year, brand new, was called a 7-day Ask Your Ask Off challenge. So the
I
the
love
Ask
that.
Your Ask Off, yeah, the Ask Your Ask Off challenge. And so for 7 days, I give people different asking assignments. And it was all designed to teach people how to ask. And one of the strategies, one of the asks, I should say, was to ask for something crazy. And this comes from a rejection therapy that was developed by this guy in Canada. Another guy who kind of took that work, wrote a book called Rejection Proof, and he did 100 days of asking. Every day he asked for something crazy. And one of the video, and he videotaped it. And uh, every day it was something weird. One day he walks into a Krispy Kreme donuts and asks them to give him a box of donuts, 5 donuts in the shape of the Olympic rings, to
Oh,
design it in the pattern of the Olympic rings. And the manager was like, okay, we've never done that before. I have no idea, but okay, we'll go for it. We'll try it. And they did it. And this thing went completely viral. And it really helped propel his book into great success, and kind of got rejection therapy on the map of just practicing making these crazy asks. So I will be quiet in just a second, but to get back to your question, is how do we do that? It's really to change the way you think, your interpretation, and then to get better at asking and practice the skill of asking more often, so that you kind of get used to it, right? You come to an acceptance.
yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's so interesting. So yeah, the two things. So I love what you said about the no, kind of reframing how you accept a no or what no means to you or whatever. Because I just think it's so true. I lived this year trying to figure out the true meaning of love. And I used First Corinthians 13, love is patient, love is kind, et cetera. And I took one word, a phrase a month. And when I was at the month of love keeps no record of wrongs, I thought, oh my gosh, how do I do that? But my conclusion was basically what you're saying is we're in charge of the narrative. Whatever happens to us, whatever people say to us, whatever, is in our surroundings, whatever, even in the past, the way we responded, we get to control the narrative, right? So it's not, like, oh my gosh, this rotten person said no to me. It's, well, they said no, and what can I learn from it? Or, but we get to reframe in our mind. And I just think that makes so much sense. It's so good.
Well, thank you. And I know that love is such a great theme for you. And one of the come Valentine's Day, we always do a thing. We always have to do a thing and go for no, which is to fall in love with no. And which sounds crazy because right, no is such a real disliked, hated word in some circles. People don't like to hear the word no, as you've said. And so how do you fall in love with the word no? And I think that, to your point, it's you look at what are the great things that come out of that, right? And I think there's a phrase, rejection is protection. That oftentimes you will get a no that is a good no, that wasn't meant for you. In fact, I remember a few years ago, we were house hunting, and we found what I thought was, I walked into this house, Kim, and I was like, and this was our first house. Richard and I have always lived in high rises. We've just never been house people. We kind of like to flit around the country and do our own thing. And so we never wanted to own anything. But anyway, I walked into this house and I was like, oh my gosh, this house is perfect. And it had these incredibly high ceilings. And then you walked through the main living room out onto this patio that had this little river running back there, and the patio was completely covered. It was and so I just immediately, I saw myself out there with my laptop working every morning, having coffee. I was selling myself, and I told the real estate agent, our realtor, I pulled him aside and I said, please do anything you can to get us this house. Please, please, please. Well, what I didn't know was that the people before us who had just visited this house made a cash offer, and the woman who was showing the house accepted it. Now, there was no contract yet, so our realtor was working on her, and he was like, "Hey, you don't have a contract yet, so please consider these people's offers." So we offered way more, and we were like, "We'll pay your fees, and we'll do this, and we'll do that." And we started making all these concessions because I couldn't imagine you know, not getting this house. So a couple days went by and it was all the negotiation and the back and forth and our realtor calling us and she's thinking about it and she's, blah, blah, blah. And I thought, oh, I can't lose this house. And he finally called and he said, she's going with the other people.
Mm.
And it made sense for her. And I get it. I mean, gosh, if it was me, I would have done the same. I kind of knew in the back of my head, I thought she'd be crazy not to like cash offer, just take the cash and go. And the next day, there was a woman who I'm friends with, a much older woman, wise, and she said, Andrea, this could be the best thing that has ever happened to you. And I was not in the state of mind to hear that. I was kind of grumbly and I was still kind of pouting over it. It was still like I was pining over the loss still. But in the meantime, we happened to, I thought, I'm going to go on Zillow. I'm going to do one last ditch effort. And if I don't find anything, maybe it's not for us. So I went on, I saw this one house. We met the real estate agent here. And you know what? We walked through it and I didn't have the same reaction of, oh my gosh, this is the best house ever. But there was so much good to it. And now, Kim, we moved in, we bought this house, they accepted our offer, and I love this house. And it was the best thing to happen. And I think back to my friend Anne, who was telling me that, and I thought, yeah, she was right. She told me, Andrea, just you don't know. It could be the best thing for you. So sometimes we get these no's, we get these rejections, things don't work out the way we want. And that's why I think when you fall in love with no and you say, you know what, it's a path that I can't see, but maybe I can accept this. And it's hard in the moment. I mean, I
Oh,
practice
yeah.
this stuff all day long, right? And I still struggle. But if you can get there, then you're open-minded to what comes next. What else is out there for you?
Yeah, so true. So true. And I think there's probably so many people listening, me for one, that I can think of times in my life when I was disappointed because it was a no, and then something even better came along. And if it would have been a yes, I would have missed out on the even better. So you know, it's something to think about. I love that she told you that. And of course, you're in the state of you don't really want to accept it. But then you find out there was something even better for you that you love and you're happy there and whatever. And it's just so true. And that too is part of reframing no or thinking about what the no can mean for you. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the second part of it is at the ask, being comfortable asking. So, what do you tell people about being comfortable asking?
So what I have learned is that the best thing that you can do whenever you want to ask anyone for anything is it's all in how you do it. Not only is it literally, if you're in person, how you come across, right? You want to come across gracious and respectful and polite. That goes a long way with people, right? Not being
Mhm.
demanding, not being pushy. Nobody likes to give anything to somebody who is not appreciative or aggressive. So I think how we come across is obviously really important. But also, what we have found is giving people kind of a setup, a context, if you will, when you go to ask for something. Richard calls this a preface, and he prefaces things with me all the time. And what I mean by preface is before he asks the question or says what he wants to have happen, he'll kind of do a setup of, hey, this is happening and that's happening and we've got this planned. And so I want to ask you, based on all of that, would you be willing to whatever, right? And so it's all about giving context. I think of it as almost guardrails when you're driving to keep you on the road. So when you ask for somebody for something and you take whatever you're feeling in that moment and you just verbalize it. So you say something like, if I wanted to ask you, Kim, to refer me to other people you know who could have me on their podcasts, I might say, hey, Kim, I know that we haven't known each other a long time, and I was just on your podcast, but I was wondering, right? So I was nervous about coming across maybe too forward, or maybe I was worried that it might look like I was taking advantage of you. So I said what I was thinking before making that ask. So how does that come across? You're getting my point on that?
Yeah, absolutely. That makes so much sense because I don't know any mind readers, right? And so often I think we ask for something or ask a question about something, whatever, and we make assumptions that they know what we're talking about, or we make assumptions of what they're going to say back to us, even. And but there aren't many mind readers out there. So to give people a little bit more information makes a lot of sense. And then it's much easier for them to actually give a yes or no.
Yeah, and one of the things I hear most often when people say I don't want to ask is they're concerned about how they're going to look, how they're going to come across. So when you verbalize how you think you might look or how you might come across, and you say, hey, this may sound forward. This may be coming too soon. I may be crossing the line here, but I want to ask because, and you can give, a reason because the timing is right or whatever. But when you call out how you're feeling, then it's no longer a secret. So you're being vulnerable. I think people appreciate that. And you you know that they know that you're aware of how this might sound. Chris Voss, who wrote the book Never Split the Difference, I've kind of I don't want to say stolen this. I've borrowed this idea from him because he talks a lot about labeling. When you label how somebody else is feeling, he talks often about how you label somebody else. So in this context, you're kind of labeling the situation or labeling how you feel. And when you do that, it takes away that fear of how will I come across, because you're just at least expressing that you're aware of it. And I think we all appreciate when somebody is self-aware. But we've also all had people, ask us for things that seem like they have no self-awareness, or they don't. You think to yourself, they have no
Mm.
idea how rude this is that they're asking for this. If they had just said that they recognize that this is something crazy to ask me, I would probably be more accepting, but instead it sounds demanding. And so when we have the guardrails, when we're willing to say more and give that context, it goes a long way in asking. And that's the big problem. And you use the perfect word. The word is assumptions. We make assumptions. One of my favorite books is called The Four Agreements. Making assumptions is one of the four agreements. And it's the thing I think that keeps people from asking the most, is just coming up with excuses and assuming that you're going to get told no as well.
Right, right, right. Yeah. Well, and that, yeah, just assuming, like you're saying, that you're going to be told no, then it really screws up the ask in so many ways. Because then your energy is coming from this. I already know he's going to say no, but I'm going to ask anyway. Way different than being open, because we also don't necessarily have a crystal ball and know the future, and you don't know what somebody else is thinking. And so I love what you're talking about, to put it into context and to be a little vulnerable. Hey, that might sound weird that I'm asking this, but I'm asking it because I think this, or whatever, setting it up. And it's not just in business, it's in relationships. It's in, you're going to the holidays and that one brother-in-law drives you crazy, and whatever it is. But how disarming is it? And how comfortable and humanizing is it when you explain a little bit more, explain the situation?
Yeah, and that's one of the fun things about this challenge that I did, was not only did we talk about the skill of asking, but just getting people into having an awareness of when and where are those opportunities, and this is kind of more of a businessy thing, but the people in the challenge would come back after we would meet every day, and they would say, I didn't realize how often I had this opportunity. I would end my sales call, and then I would forget to just ask for their email, or ask if I could put them on my email list, or ask if I could check back in 6 months. And so having that awareness of all the asking opportunities, and then to not talk yourself out of them, and being willing in those moments, we call this no awareness, is to have that no awareness, which is be willing to hear no. Make that ask. And if you get that no, if the person says, no, I don't want to be on your email list, nope, don't follow up with me, then Kim, you still, like, you can love that as well. You can say, there's something to love in that. And what's to love about that is, I now know that I can't serve you, that you don't have an interest in that, in us developing a business relationship. So I'm going to move on. You're going to move on. We both save time. It's a win-win. Better off to get the no early. So there's always something to love about the no somewhere. Sometimes you don't see it for a while, but that's the miraculous thing about it, I think.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's so good. It's so good. And it makes so much sense. And it does change so much because it changes how you're going to approach things and then how you're going to react on the other side of the approach. And so I just think of how many doors I've not opened because I haven't asked, or how many opportunities, how many things I've let go because I haven't asked, wanted to, but then felt silly asking, or felt like, oh, no matter how I ask, they're going to say no. And just assuming that's going to happen instead of just asking. Like, there's nothing bad in just asking. And so everything you say, Andrea, I love everything you say. And it's just so true. And it's so applicable to so many situations, to life in general. And I think about it even in the context of a marriage, like you're talking about how Richard frames things, and that what a wonderful thing to learn. But where do you see it play out in your relationships, and especially, I guess, in your marriage?
Yeah, it's so funny. I think what it comes down to is, to exactly what you just said. So much of this is just basic communication. And we do kind of think in our head, and we all are mind readers. And so what I've found is that when you are willing to be vulnerable, when you are willing to give the context, and make your asks, and not expect that somebody is going to be able to know exactly what you want or what you need, you have a responsibility to communicate that. And if there's something that you want, sometimes it's just, it might come out as a demand if you just state it. So turn it into a question, turn it into an ask, but give a preference, give that preface. And it's made a huge difference for us. I think the other thing too is to understand that, no is not the end. That especially in marriage, it's a negotiation. And sometimes you're going to get a no and you accept it. And sometimes you say, okay, let's put a pin in this and we'll revisit it. Because no one person in a relationship is always going to get what they want. It should not be that way. So really, I think when you embrace go for no, you really are embracing a form of open communication. That is, you're willing to accept that no. Some yeses are out there for you, some no's are out there for you. The key is to always just communicate.
That's such good advice. That's so good. Yeah, communication. Man,
Mhm.
I think about this time in my marriage. I was early married, and my husband came home from work, but before he came home from work, I thought I'm going to make his favorite meal, and I'm going to clean our apartment, and he's going to be so happy because I'm making a lasagna and he loves it. And then I made his from scratch a German chocolate cake because he loved German chocolate cake. And I was so excited for him to come home. I put on something a little, whatever, put some music in the background, and candles on the table. And he walks in the door and doesn't say anything. it was like any other day walking in the door, hey, whatever. Doesn't say, baby, you look fine, or man, the place looks great. Didn't say anything. So we sat down to eat, and I thought, oh, for sure, he's going to say, I love the lasagna, love it, anything. Doesn't say anything. He's talking about his day, talking about anything, doesn't say anything about it. And I'm stewing and stewing and stewing. And I finally got to the point where it was dessert time, and I practically threw the cake at him. And he's like, is something wrong? I'm like, is something wrong? I said, I did all this. I cooked your favorite meal. I made that cake from scratch. I cleaned, whatever, all this stuff I did. And you haven't said anything. And he was like, well, wait a minute. He said, I can't read your mind. And I'm like, well, what does that have to do with anything? And he said, I've done nothing wrong. It's your expectations that have gotten you in trouble. I didn't know you expected me to say these things. And I got up from the table and I shoved my chair and I walked in the bedroom. I slammed the door and I'm like, my expectations. He's blaming me. I did all this for him and now he's blaming me. Like, what is he thinking? My expectations. And then I went, my expectations. He was exactly right. He was exactly right that it was my expectations. He can't read my mind. And I think so often, Andrea, we're so careful to not ask, or we assume people should just know what to say. And so then we don't ask for the things that we really need. Like that was something I needed. I needed him to say, hey, baby, you're looking good tonight, or whatever I needed, but I never communicated it to him. And so how's he going to know that? And so what you're talking about just makes so much sense, that communication is the key. Like you have to be able to communicate what it is you're looking for in a way that it can make sense to them, and be vulnerable while you're doing it if that's what you need to be, but framing it in the right way. And it's okay to ask. Like, you can ask for the things that you need in a relationship, right?
Absolutely. And that's such a great story. And I think you would probably not be able to find a woman on the planet who hasn't had something very similar to that experience happen. So yes.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that is true. And it's interesting. I don't know if it's, from watching Lucy and Desi, or from, Leave It to Beaver, I don't know where it stems from, but we think that people should just come to us and say the words we're looking for people to say. And it's okay to say, how do I look? Or it's okay to say, how's the food? Or it's okay to say, hey, I've got this thing. I'd really like to do it. Is it okay to do? But it's okay to communicate your wants, your needs, your desires, the things that you're looking for. Because if you don't communicate them, they're not going to happen.
So there was this article that came out, gosh, probably about 15 years ago, and it kind of went viral on Reddit. It was a really kind of weird underground thing. And it fundamentally, it was, and I don't know if it was based on a study, but it was this woman's article, and she said, is your family, or are you made up of askers or guessers? And it's like two categories of people. And in the asker category, in that kind of family, everybody asks. So it's kind of like you call up your aunt and uncle and you're like, hey, are you guys coming for Thanksgiving or what? They call you up and they say, hey, we're coming to town. We need a place to stay. Can we stay with you? Right? Asker, like straight up open communication asker. And then there's other families where it's made up of guessers. And it's kind of like nobody outright asks for anything. Everybody kind of walks around and it's like, what are we doing? I don't know. Nobody knows. Have we actually talked? Are we going to Thanksgiving? Are we going to grandma's? Are we going to the uncle's house? Well, they haven't invited us and we don't really know. Nobody, it's like the communication is very it's not clear, right? It's kind of misty. And there's just these two kinds of families. And I have found that people who gravitate towards go for no kind of grew up in that guesser type of environment where you don't come out and just ask. You don't come out and say like, Kim, I'm coming up, I would love to stay with you. Do you have an extra bedroom? I need 3 days. And you don't say that. You kind of hint around. You're like, hey, I'm going to be in your neighborhood. We're not really sure where we're going to stay. And you're kind of waiting for the invite, And so what that comes from is this belief that if I ask, I'm being aggressive, it's rude. I think another popular belief with people who gravitate towards go for no is that I should kind of be quiet, and if somebody needs something or wants something, like they'll let me know. It's very detrimental in business, in sales. I see it all the time. People who it's kind of like they won't offer anything additional because they're so afraid of, like, from an upselling standpoint, they're so afraid that they'll look like they're pushing stuff on somebody. So it's like, well, I'll wait until they ask me. But of course, customers don't know what they don't know. And we've all had that situation where we've gotten home and we're like, why didn't that person tell me that I needed the special cord? If they had just told me, I would have bought it. But they're either not thinking about it, or they literally just don't want to look like they're selling. And so it's weird how, I think, going back to how we were raised when we started this conversation, I talked about the idea that you've had something traumatic, that maybe you've grown up in a family of askers or guessers. And then you layer in the fact that we're all biologically wired to not want to get rejected. So we have this thing, Kim, that we're constantly battling. But it's funny, the asker guesser is exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's so funny. I've never heard that before. And it's so true. It is absolutely so true. And I've had it happen like recently, actually. I asked one of my grandkids what they wanted for Christmas, and they sent me two Amazon links, and both things were $1,000 each. And I was thinking, oh my goodness, they're asking me to get something for them that's $1,000. But the truth is, I asked them what they wanted. And so they told me what they wanted. And I was put off by it because it was so expensive. But I didn't say, I'm only going to spend this much, whatever. Like, this is how much. So something that will cost in that dollar range, whatever. I
Right.
didn't say any of that. I just said, what do you want for Christmas? And he told me exactly what he wanted for Christmas. And I was blaming him, but not the right thing to do.
That's so interesting. And that goes to, it's a great lesson in those guardrails, right? When you go to ask somebody something, saying like, hey, here's what I want to ask you, but here are the parameters, right? That we need to stay within, the guidelines.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Oh my gosh, this has been so good. And I want you to talk about two, though. So the Go for No, such a great book. You can get it. You can get it at wherever books are sold. Just go buy this book. You'll love the book, Go for No. But Go for No wasn't an overnight success.
No. No, definitely not. So it was back in 2000. I feel like such a dinosaur when I talk about this stuff. It's so funny because I've been around for so long. Uh, but my husband and I, Richard, we wrote Go for No, and we thought it was a really good book. For us, the reason why we wanted to write it was, well, there were a couple reasons. One, we wanted to get the message out to more people. We thought that VP of sales would buy it for all their teams, and Amazon didn't even exist yet, or it was just an idea in Jeffrey Bezos's head, and he was still trying to work it out at his desk in his garage or whatever. So we ordered 5,000 copies. We sent out 500 of them um, to influencers, I guess you'd say, mostly heads of companies, CEOs, presidents, sales managers, that type of thing. And we're thinking they're going to read it, they're going to love it, and they're going to order. We're going to get orders we'll sell out of all of our inventory. So Kim, nothing happens. Literally, it's crickets. We finally get one order for 50 copies from one out of the 500. And we were like, okay, so not good. And we struggled year after year trying to figure out, how do we get Go for No out there? How do we get this message? How do we show more people this book? And we're sending copies and marketing, and social media isn't in existence yet, but people are blogging and there's things like that. So we're doing everything that we can. And then we went to this conference and we met this guy, Actually, he was kind of sitting near us. And back in those days, we would hand out copies of our book to anybody who was willing to take it from us. I mean, it was just like, it's cheaper than giving out a candy bar because we had printed so many copies of this book. And this guy's name is Tom. And I had overheard that he was in sales. And I thought, well, if he's in sales, this is perfect for him. So he calls us a couple days later and he says, he's like, I met you guys at that conference. You gave me a copy of your book. And we said, oh, yeah. And he said, question for you. Are you guys open-minded? And we said, well, yes. And he goes, okay, I want to give you some feedback. He said, I've read every sales book there is, and he has. And this is a great book. It's like one of the best sales books I've ever read. He said, but you guys have probably the worst cover in the history of book publishing. So if you would just be willing to change the cover, I'll take 5,000 copies. And we said, Tom, we will absolutely change the cover for you. So we hired a cover designer because we were always kind of bootstrapping back then, and things were not easy. So we kind of just designed it on our own. It was nothing special, and it was actually quite bad. So we get the cover redesigned, and then we got the cover redesigned. It looks so much better. But then we go for another 5 years of just marketing and sending copies and doing the stuff. And Amazon finally comes online in 2007, and we get it on Amazon. And finally in 2010, at the end of 2010, so it's been 10 years now, we finally hit Amazon's #1 in their sales and selling category. So we joke that we were a 10-year overnight success. It took 10 years, and oh my gosh, we wanted to give up so many times. Oh, we honestly, we really did. But I knew that it was like every time I wanted to give up and every time I really thought like, this is just crazy. What are we doing? We'd get like a note, or we'd get an email, or something would happen, or we'd see a review online and somebody would say something and it would be like, okay, no, we're just going to keep going. That's all I need is just a little ray of light to know that we're making a difference, to keep going.
Good for you for persevering, because it could have been so easy to go, well, I guess nobody wants the book. I guess this isn't what we're supposed to be doing. And instead, knowing how good it is, because it is so good. Everybody buy the book, give it away as gifts, buy 5 copies, buy 6 copies. I promise this book will change your life. It's such a great book. And so thank you, Andrea and Richard, for sticking with it and making it happen so that I could buy the book. And but it would be so easy to throw in the towel. So good for you, the perseverance. And that kind of comes back to the no, in a way, right? Because
Oh,
yeah,
totally.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we heard a lot of no's. We had one company actually write us a letter telling us that they will never recommend this book to their sales force. And it was like, I said to myself, how difficult. I mean, they really jumped through hoops. They actually crafted a letter on letterhead and sent it to us. I mean, that's about as time intensive a no as you're going to get as a company crafting letter. It was actually kind of funny. The ironic part of it is a lot of their salespeople, actually, I know for a fact, have read that book. So yeah, and it is all perseverance. And I think sometimes, one big issue is how do you know when to quit? How do you know when to give up? And that's like the hardest thing to answer. And I've read so many different positions on it, and I think it's an individual choice where you just have to say, you know what, there's nothing else I'm this passionate about, and I'm willing to just see this as far as I can take it, and I'm not ready to give up. The other question you can ask is, if I got to the destination, like at this point, maybe you've been doing something for so long and you say, if I think about your main goal, like where do you want to be? If you got there, would you be happy, or would getting there just no longer even satisfy you? Right? It's like if achieving quote success in the endeavor wouldn't satisfy you, then yeah, cut ties. And it's not quitting, it's just pivoting and going in a different direction. And so, as much as we're very proud, and I Thank you. It was very kind. I appreciate your compliment of us persevering. There's lots of things that we've done along the way in service of Go for No. You know how this goes, marketing efforts and different promotions and different things or ideas. And, we try them and then we go, it's just better to, we don't see that this is serving us. It's not, we don't enjoy it. We don't see getting to success isn't going to make this any better. So let's just quit now and put our effort and energy into something else. So there's a place for quitting. And I think that's the challenge for people.
Yeah, right, right, right. Because it's okay to walk away from things. It's okay.
Yeah.
And it's so true. Sometimes when you poured your heart and soul into it, or you put a whole lot of money into it, then it's easy sometimes to just keep dumping money into something that
Mhm.
isn't the thing you're probably supposed to be doing. So there is a big question of when it is to walk away. And I love the way you answer it, to think about the goal, and is it really the goal for you? Like, are you going to be happy if you get
Right.
there?
So I'll tell you just this really quick story going back to kind of the movie industry. So Richard and we've written screenplays together. We both wanted to write for the movies. And by the time we met, so our like little side hustle, in addition to doing Go for No, was when we lived in Southern California, actually pretty soon after we had gotten together. And we had written Go for No. This was during that crazy languishing period where it really wasn't doing much and we didn't know if it would ever do anything. We moved to Los Angeles. We moved right kind of in the center of Los Angeles, and we were going to pursue our dream of writing screenplays. And we had one, and we decided that we would get an agent. And we said, we're going to send 100 query letters. That's like first level goal. Let's get 100 no's from 100 different agents. So we sent out query letters, and basically all that means is you just introduce yourself and you tell them about your script, and then they decide if they want to hear from you. So we sent out 10 letters, got a couple no's, and a lot of no responses. Sent out the next 10. We got a response from this one agent. He was like, send me your script. We did. He called us back. He said, I love the script. I want to represent you. So we had him represent us, and we stayed in Los Angeles for about 18 months. And we said, we'll give this 18 months. If we can make a go at this, if we can get this screenplay made, we'll stay and we'll pursue this as like an actual career. And he had us, we went to meetings, we met with Hollywood producers. He had us going all over the place. We tried to sell that script everywhere. And it was right after 9/11. Things were not going well in Hollywood. It was, our whole country was completely turned upside down by 9/11. And yeah, it just didn't pan out. And so we finally, we just said, you know what, we tried. We did everything we said we were gonna do, but we're gonna keep going with Go for No. And we left Hollywood. And it was the right thing to do because we gave it, like, that was the parameter. And we said, if that doesn't work, then we're okay with quitting. We're okay that we tried in the way that we're willing to try, but we're not willing to do more. Like, we're not willing to, some people are actors and they go and it's like they're in it until they turn 85. They just they're going to do it as long as they can. You just have to decide.
Well, and you get to decide, which is nice, right? Yeah, yeah. I had this experience recently. This friend of mine, Jenny Ray, we went to a cemetery, and she said, what's here? She said a whole lot of ideas that never happened.
Mm.
And I thought, yeah, you know what? That's true. A whole lot of people die with their dream. So die with these ideas that they have that they never did anything with because they never asked, they never pursued. And I really like, Andrea, that you talk about both the how to ask, when to ask, where to ask, but ask, and it's okay if the answer is no, and that you just reframe that. Because man, when Jenny Ray said that to me, I was like, there are so many dreams that never came to fruition. And why not just ask? Why not pursue? And so go for no. Again, I say buy the book, everybody. It's so good. And so because of your journey, you also decided that there's other people that are writing books that you could help out.
Yeah, yeah. We ended up starting a little publishing company to help people. And it was kind of one of these weird things where we asked somebody to write a Go for No version for the network marketing industry. This person, his name's Ray Higdon, expert in that industry. So we wrote this book with him, co-authored it with him, and it was great. And then he said, "Hey, will you guys help me do another book?" And then he was like, "Can you help me do another book?" So yeah, we've helped people write and publish books, which was just gosh, we're like the most reluctant publishers alive, Kim. We had no, like, it is not our forte. Well, no, that's not true. It's our expertise, just because we've written and published a lot. Like, we've done Go for No. We did a book last year called When They Say No. We're writing the Go for No sequel right now. So that has been fun, just to help, just to, I guess, kind of monetize knowledge that we had that was just sitting around in our brain, that wasn't doing anybody any good. So it feels good to help people do something that is so mysterious to a lot of people. Definitely not our long-term direction, but it's been fun. We actually wrote a book called $1 Million Book Formula, and the funnest part of writing that book was sharing the experiences that we had with publishing Go for No, but also sharing our biggest failures. And we had some absolute spectacular failures, Kim, like hilarious. Our biggest failure was we wrote a book, and it sold 17 copies, and we detail why that was and all the mistakes that we made, and they're hilarious mistakes. I look back on it now and they're so funny. We ignored every piece of advice we would tell somebody else. We decided to ignore. Oh, we deserved it.
Yeah, that's so funny. That's so funny. But I love it that you're helping people, even though you're this reluctant publisher. But because you've gained so much knowledge in doing this whole process and redoing and reimagining. And so it's great that you are able to help people. And because I know so many people that there are so many people that say, gosh, I just want to write a book. And then of those people, there's a small percentage that actually write a book. And then everybody thinks that, gosh, if I write a book, everyone's going to buy my book. It's the greatest story or it's the greatest lesson. Like everybody's going to buy my book, but your family and friends might buy it and that might be it. I mean, most books don't sell. And so writing the right book can certainly be part of it.
Yeah, it's tough. And you're lucky if your family and friends buy your book.
It's true. Yeah, I can
Then
tell you
yeah, and
my
then you're
kids and yeah,
right, right.
yeah, my kids have never read my books. Yeah. So you're right. And I probably not my sister-in-law is not anybody else either. You're absolutely right. Not family for sure. Friends
Yeah.
maybe. But
Yeah.
yes.
They're like, Kim made that awful pumpkin pie. What does she know about writing a book? We're not now. We're just no.
Exactly, exactly. She fell off her bike all the time when she was a kid. She can't write a
Yeah,
book.
she can't
Yeah.
write a book. Yeah, I know. There's
Right.
something weird about that. It's so funny. I wonder, like, do Stephen King's family members just kind of go like, oh yeah, he
Right, right,
loves
right.
people like that.
He thinks he's good. He thinks he can
Yeah,
write.
right.
Yeah, so true. So, Andrea, if you were to have a piece of advice that, like the greatest piece of advice that was ever given to you that you hang on to, what is that?
Mm. Hmm. I guess the greatest piece of advice, and this is uh advice that really, I guess, my husband, who is he's such a great risk taker of the two of us. It's better to try and fail than to not try at all. I mean, that's what we believe, and we try a lot of things. We've tried a lot of things. We've failed at a ton of things, but we failed enough that a few things have been successful, and just enough, just enough to keep us going. And that's my favorite piece of advice.
That's really great advice. I like it. That is good. Wise man. You married a smart guy.
I really did. Yes. Yes. His pitch to me early on was we should write a book together. That was, we always joke, that was his kind of line. Reel me in, reel me in.
Yeah. So it's either that or what's your sign?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Because I've never heard that particular line before. So that was pretty creative.
Yeah.
It was good. Oh, so people are going to want to get in touch with you. You're fabulous. Thank you so much for being here. How can people get in touch with you? Where can they buy your stuff and see what you're doing?
I'd love people to go to goforno.com. We've got a assessment there that I'm very proud of. It's a no quotient assessment. So you've heard of there's the IQ test out there, right?
Mhm.
And then there's the EQ. Everybody talks about emotional intelligence. Well, we've come up with no quotient, which is your number of times you're willing to hear no and keep going. And so we've developed this little assessment on our website. So I love people to come over to goforno.com, take the quiz, see where you fall if your no quotient is high or low, needs work. And we have tools to help you do that. And we've got a blog and all that kind of good stuff.
Oh, good, good, good. Yeah, I'm going to go do it. That sounds like a great
Yes.
thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I can't thank you enough for being here. This was so fun, and our time went
So
by
fun.
way too fast. And so, thank you, thank you, thank you for being here. And I wish you the best with all of your future endeavors. Now that you've failed plenty, let's let everything else be a success. That would be great.
Yeah.
And thank you for joining us. And I hope you love Andrea as much as I do. And until we see each other again, be blessed.